All right, so today we're going to pull back the curtain on quantitative forecasting. We're going to see how businesses take all the numbers from the past and use them to get a surprisingly clear picture of the future. It's like turning old data into a roadmap.
I mean, really think about it. You walk into a store and bam, there it is. It feels like magic, right? But it's not. It's forecasting. It's all about this incredible balancing act to make sure companies have exactly what you want right when you want it. And that brings us to our first big idea, actually predicting the future. You know, to make smart calls on everything from how many people to hire to how much stuff to order, businesses absolutely need a solid way to look ahead. And yeah, like the slide says, it's got a lot less to do with a crystal ball and a whole lot more to do with math.
Now, when it comes to forecasting, you've basically got two main flavors. On one hand, you've got qualitative, which is all about expert opinions, gut feelings, and surveys. You could call it the art of forecasting. But what we're diving into today is the other side of the coin, quantitative. This is all about the science, using cold, hard data to find patterns.
And you know, the whole idea behind every single method we're about to look at rests on one really simple assumption. What's happened in the past is probably going to happen again. It's all about finding the rhythm in the data and just letting that beat carry you forward.
Okay, but before we dive any deeper, we've got to lay down some ground rules. Think of them as the 3 golden rules of forecasting. First, and this is a big one, no forecast is ever perfect. Ever. Second, it's way easier to predict sales for all your car models than it is for just the blue ones. And third, forecasting for next week, pretty manageable. Forecasting for next year, that gets a whole lot fuzzier.
So, where do we even begin? Well, to do this right, you first have to become a bit of a detective. You've got to look at your data and figure out the story it's trying to tell you. It's all about separating those meaningful signals from all the random background noise. And what you'll find is that these patterns tend to show up in a few common ways. You might see a trend, like a steady upward climb. Then you've got seasonal stuff, like ice cream sales exploding in the summer. A cycle is a much longer wave, often tied to the economy. Irregular events are total one-offs, like a freak blizzard. And everything else, that's just random noise, the static.
Okay, now that we know what kind of patterns to look for, let's pop open the toolbox, shall we? We're going to start with some of the most fundamental tools for making a forecast.
First up, we've got the Naïve Method. And honestly, it's as simple as it sounds. You just assume next month is going to be exactly like last month. Sold 100 widgets in April, your forecast for May is 100. Simple. It's not fancy, but, and this is key, it gives us an amazing baseline to judge all our other, more complicated models against.
Okay, taking one step up, we have the simple moving average. Instead of just looking at last month, this one takes the average of the last few months. Think of it as a way to smooth out the ride, to get rid of any of those random jarring bumps or dips in your data. It gives you a much more stable picture.
So let's actually try this out. Here's our demand data for the last 4 periods. What we want to do is forecast the demand for period 5, and we're going to use a 3-period moving average to do it. The process is super straightforward. We just grab the demand from our 3 most recent periods. That's 40, 34, and 37. We add them up, and we get 111. Then, just like step 2 shows, we divide that by 3. And boom, there it is. Our forecast for period 5 is 37. Pretty simple, right? It just takes all that recent history and finds a nice, stable middle ground. That's pretty cool, right? But what if we think what just happened is, way more important than what happened a few months ago? Well, that leads us right into our next set of tools, ones that let us give more weight to the recent past. And that's exactly where the weighted moving average comes into play. It's just like the simple version, but here we get to assign an importance, a weight to each period. And usually you give the most recent data the heaviest weight, because the assumption is it's probably the best clue for what's about to happen next. Let's use that same data, but this time we're going to add some weights into the mix. So you can see here we're saying the most recent period, period 4, is the most important. It gets a weight of 50%. Then 30% for period 3, and only 20% for period 2. So we do the math, multiply each demand by its weight, add them all up, and our new forecast is 37.6. See what happened there? By giving more importance to that most recent period, our forecast got pulled up a little higher, a little closer to that 40. All right, now let's talk about a real fan favorite in the forecasting world, exponential smoothing. What's so great about this one is that you don't need a ton of old data to make it work. It's an awesome choice when your data is pretty stable and you want a model that learns and adapts really, really quickly.
Now, don't let the formulas scare you. The idea here is actually super intuitive. All it's saying is that our new forecast is just our old forecast plus a little correction. And that correction is based on how wrong we were last time. We control how big that correction is with something called alpha. A high alpha means you react fast to new stuff. A low alpha means you're more steady. It's just a constant loop of learning from your mistakes.
Okay, so we've made some predictions, we've got our numbers, but how do we know if our guess was any good? This brings us to the final and maybe most important step, measuring your accuracy. Because making the guess is really only half the job.
The very first step is to figure out our error. And that's just a fancy way of saying, how wrong were we? As you can see here, it's literally just the difference between what actually happened and what we thought would happen. A negative number means we aim too high, a positive one means we aim too low.
But here's the catch with just using that simple error. Those negative and positive numbers can cancel each other out and make it look like our forecast was way better than it actually was. So, to get around that, we do a couple of clever little tricks. We either take the absolute value, which just makes everything positive, or we square the error, which also makes everything positive but really penalizes the big mistakes. And doing that brings us to the big three accuracy measures you'll see all the time. MAD is the average error, plain and simple. MSE squares the errors, so it's great for spotting when your forecast was a total disaster. And finally, MAPE gives you the error as a percentage, which is awesome for comparing completely different things, like cars and bicycles. With all of them, the goal is simple. You want that number to be as low as possible. So we've seen how businesses use all this past data to get a peek into the future. But hey, this isn't just for giant corporations. It really makes you think, right? From your monthly budget to how long it takes you to get to work, what in your own life could you predict a little better if you just started keeping track of the data?